My ethos has always been in selling, act as if you're the client's ad agency. That allowed us to launch a lot of new brands that would come to Crooked first and then allow us to kind of scale them as if they were our clients.
Welcome to PodBiz, the money behind the mic, where we get into the business of podcasting. I'm Norma Jean Belenky, a podcast and media strategist.
And I'm John Kiernan. I'm a podcast producer, and we're asking the question that's on everyone's mind. Where is the money in podcasting?
Each week, we talk with podcast industry professionals, marketers, and creators who are turning podcasts into a thriving business and making the industry what it is today.
With real revenue, real strategies, and real results.
If you're looking to grow or scale your show, and of course monetize, you're in the right place.
So let's get down to PodBiz.
Today we're speaking with Giancarlo Bizzarro, Vice President of Sales at Crooked Media. We'll be speaking about how baked-in ads are the gold standard, the general landscape of the podcast advertising industry, and how he got started on the Obama campaign and then ended up at Oxford Road as a result, and how his professional journey of media buying brought him into the world of podcasting in the early days of ad buying. Let's get down to PodBiz. Giancarlo Bizzarro, Vice President of Sales at Crooked Media. Thank you for joining us on PodBiz.
Thanks so much for having me today. I really appreciate being here and excited to kind of talk to you about the industry.
Well, right off the bat, where's the money in podcasting?
What a question. The money is generally dispersed mainly amongst direct advertisers, programmatic advertisers, subscription. And by programmatic, you have AdSense, you've got sort of whatever kind of audio RSS programmatic. It's coming from either direct advertisers that are buying across a network, people coming through the trade desk and other variety of places. You're seeing money in branded content, you're seeing money in custom segments, and now you're seeing some money in video as well. So I think that in the past, as somebody who was giving out that money, a long time ago, over a decade ago at this point, that was mainly direct. I think a majority of the money is still coming mainly from direct, but you're seeing it diversify a little bit into other avenues. And that's something that I think everyone can be, if they're smart, pick up on. And if they're, small, they can still get a piece of the pie.
That answer is really what we've seen across the board, right? Subscriptions is the other one that everybody's talking about right now. Subscriptions, but branded content and just ads in general. There's a lot of opportunity for people who have small businesses or maybe are coaches to have their own podcast and use it as a funnel as well. But ads is really the top one. So thanks for sharing. At Crooked Media, you guys create amazing content, right? When you're talking about monetizing shows like that, when you think about the iteration of it, where in that journey does monetization factor in?
Well, I think in the past, most of our content, and it continues to be primarily our main driver of revenue, is always on content. So our weekly news shows are the ones that drive a majority of the annual sponsorships that we've had since our inception. Our narrative content in the past, we would be getting sort of co-production funding from, I'd say, the major players. I think a lot of them have stepped away from that, which is a shame because I think that a lot of that content is necessary. It provides so much depth in a sea and myriad of, and I love our always on shows. I love all of our babies equally, but I also think that sometimes in amongst the long form talk, there needs to be some sort of in-depth substantive content. And that's where those short form narrative nonfiction content really play. But we're seeing more of that kind of move away from that. And I think that if we're looking towards content that can still sort of bridge the gap between the two of those, it needs to be always on for it to be profitable in this environment. With that being said, if you can find a partner that's willing to support that, whether it be a advertising sponsorship, a sort of production partner, or one of the big players to fund that kind of content, I still think it's very valuable and important. And I, having prior to Crooked been at WME, that was one of the strategies there, was that sort of IP pipeline perception. And I know that there have been a lot of offshoots. Wondery did it best to start with. And, Endeavor really tried to kind of take a piece of the pie. They funded some things, Q Code, what have you, has done a lot of that. I remember selling the first Q Code iteration when I was at WME. It was a podcast with Rami Malek. He had just come off winning an Oscar. And, I think that's kind of tempered down a bit. But what I will say is that a lot of the same frustrations that you're seeing in sort of television and film, at least domestically in the United States, you're seeing in podcasts, and a lot of that content's not being as funded in the same capacity. So a lot of the money for the direct sold ads is still going to that always on attributable content that can be continuous, where an advertiser can build that into their media marketing mix, and they can, see how it runs over the long term, potentially partner with those types of people going forward. That's where, I don't want to say unfortunately, but I will say it's a shame that like a lot of the short form content isn't necessarily as picked up, because I do feel like there are opportunities if it's done in the correct way. And by that, I mean, if the ads are done in a certain way that benefits the advertiser, and if there can be a mutually symbiotic relationship. But it is expensive to make that kind of content, and it sometimes doesn't return on the investment. And therefore, that's why you're seeing a lot of companies sort of pull back and gear towards an always on format, which is much more controllable, modelable, capable of being profitable in the long term.
And scalable as well, I would say. It's definitely interesting because, I mean, even, 3 years ago, we were still seeing large amounts of money being spent on speculative work, right? But it is speculative, right? Because when it comes out, you don't know if you're going to be able to monetize, because you don't know, what the reception or the audience is going to be. So it's been very interesting to see that industry shift, I guess, in a way. And I think it does kind of change the creativity that's out there for people who want to really dedicate their careers to making great work.
Yeah, I think that it's allowed for more of, I use this term very lightly, the loudest voice in the room to kind of be the person that gets the most coverage, because they're continuous, as opposed to something that may be more substantive and unique and probably
and take time. Yeah, and have maybe 20 people working on it, right? Have maybe 20 people, their hands and their eyes and their ears working on one episode. That can be really labor intensive as well.
But it produces some of the best content. I mean, some of the stuff that I love are short form content. We've won numerous awards. I think that the key is to bridge it with always on. We've done that really successfully when we've created content. Like, we did a show about voting in the election called The Wilderness, and when we've kind of paired that with Pod Save America, it's been successful. We've made 2. I've got the Webbies right behind me right there that I'm very proud of.
They're not in the shot? What?
Shot behind me because the picture is nicer. And so, like, we did 2 podcasts on the World Cup that I'm extremely proud of, called World Corrupt. And it basically showcased, I'd say, some of the corruption within the world of sport, specifically within FIFA, and the awarding of World Cups to places like Qatar and Saudi Arabia. And we partnered with the Men in Blazers, which are very, I'd say, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, football, soccer podcasts in the world. They do a lot of the stuff for the Premier League here. And what we figured out was they wanted to talk about this subject matter, but they couldn't really do that because they're not really in politics. And, they're the experts in football. And we were able to kind of cross-pollinate Pod Save the World, which is our foreign policy podcast. If it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest in the world on foreign policy. We were able to kind of measure those into one show that was able to kind of be released. And the way that we were able to sell it historically was based off of the people who are already buying Pod Save the World and Men in Blazers. So what they came into it with was a knowledge of what worked on those shows, already having the kind of track record of success on their advertisers. And so coming to them with this unique limited series, but that was also going to be living on a feed, it de-risked the
absolutely. It's like you're at the same restaurant. You may just be ordering a different special. Show us the Webbies. Hold them up to the camera.
Yeah, so here's one. Best
well done.
Partner collaboration, and here's another that we won. So we won the People's Voice Award for that year, and it's something I'm really proud of because, having been in sales my whole career, or buying, or on the talent agency side, it's very rare that you get the opportunity to be an executive producer on something. And, being able to kind of lean into that and find a niche that both an advertiser can come to and know that they trust you for their actual media spend across the board year over year, it de-risks the situation. It allows them to come in more confidently. It allows them to use historicals of what has worked and what hasn't worked on those shows to know, like, this is an opportunity that I can get in on that isn't going to be, something that we're launching out of the blue that may or may not work. The subject matter may be interesting. I think that's one of the challenges limited series have faced over the years. And it's something that, I have a lot of empathy towards, because we've created a ton of great content that has been very difficult to sell. But one of the things that I tried to implement is early on, since I've been at Crooked, was launching those series on different RSS feeds that are already continuous. And of course, baking in the ads, because once you do that, you de-risk the situation for an advertiser and allow them to get to a point where they can use their historicals to buy against. And from that perspective, there's much more appetite towards coming in and trying something that may be adjacent to the content that they're used to buying, but still a limited series and unique.
So when you say baking in, you're still selling baked in ads on shows that have maybe an evergreen audience and topic.
Yeah, we try to do what's best for the advertiser. Obviously, we'll mark up any unsold ad units, or we'll add ad markers, because at the end of the day, what we've noticed is that, and I've been buying ads for 10 years. I started my career similar to Adam, who introduced us. I started on the ad agency side 10 years ago at Oxford Road. I think I was in one of the first, I want to say 10, maybe 12 employees there. And the person who was running what they called emerging media at the time left to go to an MCN. And about a month when I was in, and they were like, "Who likes podcasts?" And I raised my hand. They're like, "Great, you're now the head of podcast." Fine. We took that and went from, I'd say, a very small team in a WeWork to working out of the CNN building because of all the clients we launched in the space. We went, we 35x growth. I think if you look at the numbers that the Wall Street Journal reported, we placed, I think, around 40% of all the ad spend for calendar year since when I took over. And one of the unique things about being on that side of the equation was just kind of, we were making it up as we went along on what we were buying, whether it was the pre or the mid. But what's true then is still true today. The baked in ad is the king of all ad units. And that's not to say that, programmatic ads or run of network ads can't be effective, and especially given the fact that we've come so far in terms of attribution. One of the things that I would say is that if you get a baked in ad and a piece of content and you can prove its performance, you can always go back and listen to it, know that it's been there, know that you haven't been flighted against impressions that you weren't anticipating to buy, know that you haven't, been in every ad unit in an episode. And one of the things that I've always said in my career is the first time you hear a piece of content, or first time you hear an advertisement, it's content. The second time you hear it, it's noise. As a listener, as somebody who consumes a lot of podcasts, and as a salesperson, I would be remiss to say when I hear an ad a second time, I don't want to hit the skip button automatically. And to me, I think it's incumbent on us as salespeople, it's incumbent on the hosts to make the experience for the listener as unique as possible, even if the content or the copy is the same, to try to personalize it in a way that really is resonant with the content, with your tone, with the audience. And I think at Crooked, we've done a really good job of that. I feel like we've been the gold standard in how to kind of bring forth ads. Our hosts banter amongst one another. Sometimes they banter too much amongst each other. Sometimes
no, but it's built into the show, right? And it kind of is almost like an extension of the listening experience. That makes a lot of sense. I think it's very interesting, that we're still talking about baked in ads in 2025, because when you talk to a lot of people in the ad space, they really want to push DAI or programmatic because that inventory can continue to be sold. But I think there is a case, like you're saying, for advertisers to really retain that value. And it's really built into that organic trust of the host with the audience.
Yeah. And, it doesn't have to be a one size fits all model. And I think that was the dichotomy between people who did not come from this space, came from digital advertising, came from other media, into podcasting, I'd say between 2020, maybe 2019 to now, is that they're like, it has to be this way. None of the holding co's will buy. And the reality of it is, like, unless we want to be digital advertising, we have to accommodate every type of advertiser. If they want to buy programmatically, that's fine. We can do it programmatically. If they want to buy a bait ad, great. Like, that's the gold standard.
I'm going to ask you some questions right now that you probably don't want to answer.
I answer all questions.
In terms of pricing, right? Because when you're looking at a DAI, right, you've got a timed campaign. But when you're looking at baked in ads, I'd love for you to name numbers, but even if you could just tell me, is it like 5x, 10x what you'd be spending on a DAI or programmatic ad?
It just depends. Like, if you're buying like a targeted run of network thing and you can't control frequency capping and the like, to me, I think that something like that in the high teens to mid 20s is a fair price point. When I was buying that, I would give you half that number and I would tell you to take a hike if you didn't want to bake in my ad. But selling it, I feel like a baked in ad, like in that 30 to 40, maybe $50 range, depending on the type of content. But what I can say is not every show, even the same genre of show, is created equal. And that's something that I learned from my time as an ad buyer. And I've also learned from my time as a salesperson. And you can have two shows that are the exact same subject matter, pretty much the exact same format, start to finish. And one of the hosts may not be great, or you can tell that they don't care about a product. And when they do a read and you're paying a lot of money for it and it doesn't work, the marketplace will dictate that. And you can have another host that can be spectacular at doing this and it converts. And so in some instances, as a buyer, I would sometimes pay above $50, $60, $70 CPMs for shows because of sell-through rate, because of effectiveness, because of conversion. And you can't necessarily get that even when you're targeting an audience programmatically, because as much as we want to say like we're getting this specific person, at the end of the day, we have visibility. And when I started, we had maybe 10, 15% visibility into the audience. Today, we're probably around like 60 to 70% with all the attribution metrics, whether it be any of the platforms that serve Podscribe, Magellan, what have you, right? Like they're taking a sample size and they're using IP addresses to cross-reference. And sometimes you can see things, but I don't reject the notion altogether of sort of the targeted ad. I do think that we're going to get more sophisticated, especially as more platforms try to sort of segregate audiences, which I don't think is a great thing, honestly. I'm for as open sourced of a media.
It's interesting where we're going. Just to follow up on that really quickly, are you selling baked in ads on a CPM?
I've always bought and sold baked in ads on a CPM.
So if the ad's already baked in, what if it exceeds their budget? Like how do they?
It doesn't. We don't bill based off of impressions. I never bought based off impressions. So if my ad lives there forever, I'm buying against a 30, 60, 90 day total. We sell against sometimes it's mostly a 60-day total. And for the most part, it's the same thing with YouTube, right? Like we have YouTube standalone original shows that are video forward. We're selling against an average, right?
Okay.
And I think
so you're coming in with an estimate and then that's based on their budget and then you go from there.
Correct. Because if you're selling programmatically and you have 4 ad units open in a show, if I'm the advertiser and I found out that my ad ran in every single one of those 4 ad units, I know that the listener has skipped 3/4 of those, if not all 4 of them. And to me, I'm getting billed for all 4 of them. So to me, the validity of that is probably less than something that if I actually baked it in and listened to it. The converse argument and playing devil's advocate with myself is, in some sophisticated sense, sometimes you can pixel those and you get whether or not that's actually been listened to, but that's not always entirely accurate either. So bluntly, I still feel like the baked in ad is the gold standard because, it's only going to run once an episode. You can look back towards that episode, track immediate performance against it. What you can't do though, what you can do with a run of network is, if you're testing run of network, sometimes the bigger networks will let you see like what shows converted, and then maybe you can put money towards that. With that being said, though, I do feel like there is a very sort of it's not as sophisticated as I feel like it needs to be at this point.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. It's a very interesting value proposition for advertisers. Thanks for joining us here on PodBiz. If you're liking the show, please subscribe and write us a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other podcast pros find the show. Thanks so much. And back to PodBiz. You talked a little bit about Oxford Road and your time at WME. It really seems like that's how you got into the podcasting industry. So what was that journey like for you?
Well, I actually began my career working for the Obama campaign as a field organizer straight out of college. I graduated in 2008, probably the worst time to graduate school.
Me too. The best year.
Right. And I had intentions of coming to Los Angeles and working in entertainment. I kind of got dragged out into the Obama world, ran 3 field offices in Colorado, and then got into political media and advertising in Chicago. And one of the things I actually did there is I started to sort of put together television commercials, YouTube, sometimes radio. And we had a candidate running for Secretary of State in Colorado, and I wanted to buy targeted, ironically, here I'm going back to targeted audio for them and I reached out to some Pandora people and we made one of the first buys. I think it was 2009 or 2010. I can't remember the exact date. And I saw a little bit of effectiveness. I don't know if the candidate won. I can't remember. We had so many races. But I did that for about 5.5 years, and I thought I'd never be working in politics again. I moved out to LA and then literally applied on ZipRecruiter to a job at Oxford Road and got a few interviews, met Dan Granger. He was like, wow, you've got a really impressive track record. I'm just going to hire you. And I kind of was hired sort of as he was expanding the agency. And then I kind of ran podcast buying for them end of 2014, 15, and then all the way through the middle of 2016 before I went to Cadence 13. And what I learned in that period of time is that nobody knew what they were doing. This was kind of the wildest of Wild Wests. We were making it up as we went along. But what we had is the buying power and the ability to kind of see performance across the board. I think we had around 75 plus clients in the year and a half that I was there. And that kind of opened the doors to people coming to me being like, you really know how to buy this. We're still figuring out how to sell it. Do you want to come sell for us? And I went to a company that ended up being Cadence 13. And luckily, I was one of the first employees there. I was their second West Coast person. And they were, kind enough to ask my opinion on what shows they should go after. And one of them was a show that I had just got let go by Bill Simmons. It was on the Ringer. It was called Keeping It 1600. And I placed a lot of ad spend on it. And we went out and got it, and that ended up being Pod Save America. And I actually thought I was going to lose my job because I wasn't a great salesperson. I would tell people, like, I don't know about this. It's really tiny. I came from a buyer's mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And what was unique about it was the minute that show came on, I knew it was going to crush because having worked in politics, having bought it as an ad buyer, I went out to a bunch of people. And I wasn't allowed to work with Oxford Road or any of the major holding codes, but I went out to a bunch of clients that were in comparable fields to the ones I was buying for at Oxford Road. One of them was Parachute Sheets. They were here in Venice. And I was like, I used to buy for a competitor of yours. You guys should get on this show. I promise you, if it doesn't work, like, I can't pick up the tab, but like, you can employ me to sell sheets at your workshop. And they took a risk on it, and they bought it at a number baked in that was comparable to what Keeping 1600 was. And it did 20 times that number. And essentially it helped build their business. Like, every time I talk to the people who used to work there, they're like, you guys helped start our career. It launched my sales career because I had sold maybe 2 or 3 spots in another show in 3 months. I thought I was going to get fired, and that took off and helped Cadence 13 grow. We signed a bunch of other shows. I was able to sell across the board. And what was unique about that was I really got a good sort of sense of what types of shows worked for what kinds of advertisers. I kind of was able to translate my buyer mentality to launch a lot of new brands in this space. And at that point, WME came and they were like, we're starting a podcast division. Would you like to be our West Coast person doing ad sales? And, as much as I loved and grateful for the time at Cadence, I went over there and I got to sort of see the intricacies of how an agency works. And it was very unique to see the inside of that. And I worked with a lot of great people who came from a myriad of different backgrounds, but also, seeing the deal terms on a lot of the deals that were happening in the marketplace gave me a leg up on, I feel, a lot of people. And then Crooked came, and someone who I used to work with at Cadence was like, listen, we've had a salesperson, it didn't work out. They're interviewing a bunch of people, but I know you're the guy, like, you have to interview with them. It's a big year for us in 2020. And I was like, okay, I'll take the interviews. And they were kind enough to offer me a job. And so pre-COVID, February 2020, I came to Crooked. I was one person. They had a couple of people there who were wonderful. And, we did a really good job. We were selling concurrently with Cadence. So that was a little bit awkward at first, but I had really good relationships with those people, and we worked with them till 2022. We built a fantastic team. My ethos has always been in selling. Act as if you're the client's ad agency. And what that allowed us to do was to launch a lot of new brands that would come to Crooked first, and then allow us to kind of scale them as if they were our clients. And I think that level of trust that you develop with people, that personal relationship, the ability to give them the information that you have from a history of buying, selling, and knowing what will work for them and what won't, and giving them tests in a I'd say a manner that is concurrent with the way I used to buy, I think has helped me in my career at least gain a level of trust with a lot of the places that I work with now that I would say a lot of other people have had to earn, or, have not had that opportunity. So
Yeah,
I'm very
absolutely. Especially to be on the inside of a couple of organizations that, number one, were just like rocket ships. I heard Marissa Mayer from Google and Yahoo, she was CEO of Yahoo for a while. She once said when she started at Google, like when she came out of college, she was talking to one of the founders and she was saying, oh, I interviewed for all these other things and they offered me this title and that title. And I think it was Larry or Sergey, I can't remember which one. But they said to her, when you're on a rocket ship, it doesn't matter where you're sitting. Like, you know? And so I think
that's true.
yeah, and sometimes I think, when you're in an emerging industry, when you're with a company that is poised for growth and you really get to kind of, you know, have that like bootstrap Wild West moment, it almost doesn't matter where you're sitting in the room, you're in the room. And so that's a really great point. What would you say is a key move or metric or even mindset that's made the biggest impact on your podcasting career and the success of your clients?
I've learned a lot of things from a lot of brilliant people. I think Dan Granger taught me how to be respectful of vendors, people who are selling, clients, just always, even if you don't agree with somebody, at least have the decency to listen to them. Hernan Lopez has given me a lot of advice in my career. He was the one who kind of was like, you should go to WME. He tried to hire me back in the day. Sometimes I regret not going to work for him, but I think he's a mentor, somebody who's always provided me good advice. I would say, the people at Cadence were fantastic. Stephen Cohen was great. And I think paying that forward and being able to sort of be as transparent as you possibly can with the knowledge that you have, not hoarding information, not siloing things so that, your people can't, eclipse you. I think the thing that makes me most proud in my career is when I work with somebody and then I see them go on to do amazing things. Like, Karo Shaklazian was a mailroom trainee at Oxford Road. And when he left Oxford Road, he went to go be head and then VP of marketing at Wondery. And he basically launched everything from Dirty John, Dr. Death, and he created the feed drop in podcasting. And he's brilliant. And he's somebody that I look to. He was the one who came to me and said, like, you got to be doing video in 2020. And he convinced me to go to our team at Crooked. And to Crooked's credit, like, the people there are phenomenal. There's so many smart, brilliant people. I learned so much every day just by being in the room with a lot of our talent.
Yeah.
I think that knowledge is meant to be shared. If we can synthesize it in a way that is easily digestible for everyone, then we have a better industry as a whole. And I don't think a lot of people want to do that. I think that there's a lot of, the industry has a lot of great people. We're a very friendly
Yeah, we're a very
industry.
collaborative industry. I have to say, podcasting is one of the few industries, specifically in media, where people are collaborative more so than they are competitive. What's something that people don't know about what you do?
Oh, man. That's a really difficult question to answer. I think people don't know that I try to get I roll up my sleeves and do everything, whether it be pulling air checks, putting together proposals. You have to lead by example, even if sometimes you don't necessarily want to do the work. I think that as difficult as that can be sometimes, it really sets an example for everyone. And I also like to empower people on my team to take full responsibility. I try to bring them into meetings with people that otherwise they would be let out, not in the room. And, I've executive produced 3 podcasts as a salesperson, which I think is very rare. I don't know how many salespeople have had the luxury of doing that, whether it be the 2 World Corrupts with the Men in Blazers or this series in Italy with the team at Voice in Milan and Nick Mainoni, who's a just great talent. I really try to take the time to listen to as many shows as I can. I'm, trilingual, dual citizen. My biggest passion is the expansion of our industry globally. It's one of the things I would talk to Dan Granger and Scott McDonald at Oxford Road about, is that I want podcasting to be global. And now seeing that come to fruition is something that I'm both very passionate about, but I'm also very afraid of, because if you look at Europe, for instance, there's a lot of money in public media, whether it be in, England with the BBC, in Italy, you've got RAI. And I am afraid that our industry, as evidenced by the last election, has the ability to either make content that can be uplifting or make content that can be dumbing down. And I don't want us to dumb down content that otherwise would be made, because we are, like you said, a rocket ship that's taking off. I think that as salespeople, as CEOs of companies, as executives, we have a definitive responsibility to make content that's both entertaining, educative, engaging, and inspiring. And if we're incapable of doing that, we've failed like our mandate as what we're trying to do as sort of a media channel as a whole. Because I think that podcasting is going to merge and it's going to take over me and
No,
everything
it's
else.
interesting, right? In an industry where, we're emerging, how there's that almost ethos and the ethical standard that we have to not only carry but set. That's a really important thing as well. If you had to start over today, is there anything you would do differently to grow faster or smarter?
I mean, I feel like I've done so much. I don't know what else I can do. I've worked pretty hard my career. I've been fortunate to be in the right place at the right time and to have been given so many tremendous opportunities. And I recognize the privilege that I've had and getting to where I've been able to get. The one thing I would say is I would try and be less fanatical about letting things go. There have been times in my career where I can get I'm very Italian like that. If something I feel is not going the right way, I can get very frustrated, attached and very emotional. And that's just who I am. That's my personality. But I think that makes me more human. And I feel like that also allows me to provide a better product at the end of the day, better service to people, ensure that things happen in a manner by which I feel they'll be received in a positive way. But I think that that's probably one thing that I would recommend to anyone starting out is to just not get as into the weeds and passionate about things, because that's something that I can't control. It's just part of my heritage and human nature.
Yeah, it might just be a double-edged sword. It might be what also got you to where you are, right? Well, we always ask everybody one last question here on PodBiz. What are you most excited about coming up within the podcasting industry?
We've talked about video for a while now. We've done it at Crooked since 2019. We've had ads in 2020. I'm excited to see how this expands globally, how we kind of take the mantle, I'd say, from traditional television. I think that's something that we're all trying to figure out. But I know that it's going to take a massive effort, and it's also going to be incumbent on us to do the right thing a lot of times because we aren't regulated in the same ways as regular media. So while it's exciting, I'm also anxious about it. And I do take that very seriously because I feel like global expansion is here, and it's just on us to sort of make sure that what we're doing is done in the right light. While we have our domestic content at Crooked, we have a show in the UK. It's phenomenal. Pod Save the UK. We've made this collaboration with Voice. I feel like you're going to see a lot more content that transcends borders. And while that's fantastic, it's also daunting. But I think that we're ready for it. And as an industry, we can only kind of get better from learning from each other.
You may notice that I have a bit of a different background because in between when we initially recorded this episode and the episode was scheduled, Giancarlo and Crooked Media announced CrookedCon. So Giancarlo, tell us a little bit about your in-person event strategy and how it plays into the larger political conference strategy in the US, what's been missing in the market, and what you guys are really looking forward to doing.
Yeah, our live event strategy is always traditionally centered around touring of our podcasts. So whether it be Love It or Leave It, Pod Save America, Strict Scrutiny, Hysteria, we've taken some of these shows on the road, and we have a really great following that comes and attends and gets really immersed with our hosts and the content that they love. And what we have been ideating on for a while was to create, I'd say, a convention or something that allows people to congregate that's outside of the traditional, what you would consider political conference. And I think that if you look at least our side of the political spectrum, who are the people making the decisions? It's usually people in back doors, consultants, you've got fundraising, all of that stuff is happening in a silo. And, you've got the grassroots organizers, activists, volunteers, organizations, issue advocacy groups that aren't necessarily talking to one another. And so what we decided to kind of do as an impetus to sort of get our side to actually coordinate and be a little bit more organized was to create this event that's happening in Washington, D.C. on November 7th. And the night before, we have an episode of Pod Save America at the Warner Theater on the 6th to encourage, I'd say, our most loyal audience members, grassroots activists, But also, we intend to have a lot of members of Congress, potentially 28 hopefuls, people within the Democratic Party, to kind of get together and listen. Because as a party, we are a big tent, and that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone agrees with one another, but we need to agree upon as a path forward. And so we're excited about this. We think it's going to be really unique, different. John and Tommy recorded a promo, and they were jokingly calling it DPAC in reference to the Republicans' sort of CPAC. And it's something that is lacking on our side, and we really want to have an event that allows people to gather where where they feel like these high impact conversations that aren't necessarily taking place because of potentially policy disagreements, the inability to communicate amongst each other. We think this is where that will happen, and we cannot wait for it to. And we plan on having a lot of different talent there. Of course, all of our hosts will be there, or a majority of them. We plan on having hosts from other networks, people that we intend to kind of showcase. We want to have these conversations be authentic. I think that's the key. If you're thinking about festivals, not to disparage festivals who put people there, but a lot of the times when you're at a festival, people are generally paying to be on those panels and to speak, or you're invited, but you're carrying on whatever narrative that is sort of the commercial narrative. In our perspective, we want these to be as authentic as possible, so that we feel like we're addressing the issues, not just of what's happening or what has happened, but what we can do to move forward. And so we're excited about this. We think it's going to have a major impact. We're excited about the fact that electeds, activists, voters, donors, pundits, podcasters, and pretty much anyone who is a super fan of ours can get together at a place to really kind of hone in on what the best path forward is. And we think that there's going to be a lot of really smart people there who want to do good, right? And I think that that's the objective of this, is to give us the impetus to, I think, combat what's going on in the marketplace, or not the marketplace, excuse me, in the world, and especially here at home here in the United States.
I mean, first off, just give us a couple of hard numbers here. What are the dates?
The dates are November 6th and November 7th, and they'll be in Washington, D.C.
So it's coming right up. It's super soon. And what's the projected attendance you guys are hoping for in year one? Brand new.
Listen, so we're looking at about maybe 2,200 people, 22 to 2,500 people. That's between Pod Save America and the event. The location it's going to be taking place at, like I said, Pod Save America is at the Warner Theater, and then CrookedCon on the 7th will be happening at the Wharf. And so we'll have a main stage, a second stage, a creator and media lounge. We do anticipate this to get a lot of press, a lot of promotion. We think that it's going to be something that's different, unique. We're excited about it. And I would say that for the most part, we really want this to kind of be a success so that we can continue it going forward.
In terms of goals, right, like you touched upon, it's not just about attendance, which, for a first time event or conference of this scale, right, you need numbers to justify to your team to do it again, right? I think we all know that. But also, in terms of the social and political change you guys are hoping to move the needle with, what are some potential outcomes that you guys at Crooked are looking for in terms of those kind of goals?
Well, obviously, attendance is huge, right? Because if we can sell this thing out, it proves both to our audience, our senior leadership, the entire sort of ecosystem on the left, that there's demand for this specifically for our side, and there's demand for it in an authentic way, not one that is, closed off to people who want to contribute but are, I guess, kept out of those conversations. We brought this to market on July 29th. That's when we announced it. And since then, we've already hit 70% of our ticket sales for both Pod Save America and CrookedCon. We are really excited about it. The one thing that I will say is our audience is really activated. They're engaged. They want to be a part of our community. They want to be there on the front lines helping moving things forward, especially because usually when we educate people on our content or with our events, we entertain them at the same time and we inspire them to take action. And that's exactly what they're doing. So for the most part, we're looking for sponsors still. We've got a few really good sponsors in. We got the Americans for the Separation of Church and State as a sponsor. We've got a few more who are just finalizing the details right now, but I don't want to speak to that until they're official. And we would love to have any partners who want to be part of the solution moving forward and be a part of something that's a little bit more collaborative. I think that one of the unique things about what we've done is we've partnered with people like the Bulwark in the past, specifically around the Human Rights Campaign of Andre, I forget his last name, I'm going to botch this, around the Venezuelan hairdresser who got put in CCOT. And that was really successful. He's now, been released. And I think that we can influence people to really take action and make their voices heard. And that's something that we're trying to do here in addition to coordinating going forward.
Specifically, Crooked is in a really interesting position, right? Because it's, an entertainment vehicle, right? You have Pod Save America as a flagship show. You have a host of an amazing slate of content. And also, it's not just entertainment. You are inspiring change, right? Politically within the country. So it's how do you take the audience and you go from audience to, inspired action with a specific group of people. So it's definitely, I think, in person helps, because people get that in-person inspiration. They meet other people. And to be honest, for anybody who's attended any conference of any kind, or, specifically even podcasting, there's really a summer camp vibe, right? And so I think when you meet people in person, there's that inspiration, you're collaborating. So it'll be really interesting to see, if any policy comes out of this as well, and how you guys will be able to move it forward, maybe into, a larger political event, even for the Democratic Party. So super interesting.
Yeah, that is the objective. And I think that one of the unique things about this event is there's going to be a lot of electeds there. There's going to be a lot of 28 hopefuls. And so, having them not just hear from, I say this lovingly, donors or the consultant class of our side, but actually hear from activists and people who are on the ground, allows them to convey their message both to those types of folks and also ideally hone in on a plan that will help us be a little bit more effective in our messaging, because, we could all use that at this point.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting time in American politics. Well, Giancarlo, thank you for coming on and for this exciting update.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Norma.